Hello, everyone. Welcome to Tea with TPS, an informal chat with thought leaders of India and abroad. Today, we have a very distinguished young person, Diana Joseph, who is at the leadership level of what is called Project VENDA, which means no drugs. The word drugs doesn't appear there, but when you say Project VENDA, everybody knows what it means. Recently, I had the privilege to launch Project VENDA's Trivandrum chapter. As one of the organizers, Mr. Swaroop, said there, Project VENDA coming to Trivandrum is good news and bad news. He said the good news is that Project VENDA is spreading, it is coming to new areas. And the bad news is that Trivandrum is becoming a target area to deal with this issue. This is very true. So when you look at this project, we look at it from the perspective of where it is active and why it is active and what are the kinds of things you do. So when I met Diana, I thought I would invite her to this program and ask her not only about the kind of work that she does and how she landed up here, and also how much this project has been successful in controlling the drug menace. Welcome, Diana.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for having me on your show.
Very good. So tell me a little bit about your background, how you hit upon this idea of fighting against the drugs menace.
I have a social development background, and I've been working in the social development sector for the last 20 years. And I run the Fourth Way Foundation, which works out of Bangalore. And in Karnataka, we've done a large project in terms of inclusion of children with disabilities. So 6 years back, when I moved to Kerala, one of those issues, social issues that was brought to my table from various quarters was the issue of substance abuse among children. I did a little research, a dipstick survey to understand what was the problem, and the results of which really threw me off guard. 6 years ago, the prevalence of the issue of substance abuse among young adults was looking at 8 to 10%, which is fairly high. And if it was in other countries, it's red alert. And in a little state like Kerala, when we have 8 to 10% as prevalence, then there is reason for alarm. So I did look at the then Subodham project, which the Chandi government was launching. And they had huge investments that we're talking about, 2030 Lahiri Vimukta Keralam, and huge plans being rolled out. And the plan, when I really looked into it from a research perspective, sort of looked like there was no investment or no space for working with children as young as schools and colleges. So then I did go meet the relevant people, did make the case, and then what I realized was, governments move, people move, but the problems remain. So we went head on into
the Fourth Way Foundation. Why is it called Fourth Way? It's a bit scary because when you hear about second wave and third wave of the pandemic,
definitely not anything.
But this was long before pandemic came, I suppose.
15 years ago, yes. And Fourth Way primarily.
Fourth Way?
Yes, it's from Alvin Toffler's management theories. Alvin Toffler, in his books, divides history into three waves: the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, and the knowledge revolution. So man has been through the three phases of revolution, and whatever we've created in these three revolutions kind of have also become burdensome on man. Whatever we are facing today shows our lack of stewardship and responsibility as well. So Fourth Wave is kind of
if you're dealing with the current problems, that's all that it means, right?
Exactly. Even the knowledge revolution that we've created has its own downsides. And as much as industrial knowledge revolutions have taken us as far as mankind and humankind, I think we've also created ample problems from ecology to environment, and everything that we're facing today is also a result of what we've created. So fourth wave is kind of a responsible wave in mankind. So that's how we coined the fourth wave. And fourth wave primarily is to make communities aware of their place and space and their responsibility to keep everything that they've created and be good
Don't we
stewards.
refer to that these days as the fourth industrial revolution also? Don't they say that?
Kind of, yes.
That is after the information revolution or whatever. I don't know how you count it. But today we talk about the fourth industrial revolution.
Right.
And of course, it's all now rather blurred. After the pandemic, things are not looking so clear as to you are going in a particular direction. But now it's all a bit confused. It's a rudderless world now, so it's very difficult to make all these classifications. Okay, tell us about Project VENDA again. And how did you go about it? How did you set it up?
So Project VENDA started off with a small research. We did a dipstick survey around the red alert areas, where we call high risk areas in and around Ernakulam. We started mapping by 5-6 areas, and today, as I speak to you, we have around 230 spots just in Ernakulam, which we call red alert areas, which is kind of an increasing trend. As much as we've been working, I think there is an influx that we really cannot control. Everyday newspapers sort of show us what's happening. So when we set out, we realized that this is also a community issue. It's a issue where the community needs to take ownership, and it just cannot be people working in silos, the cops, the jurisdiction, the enforcement. They can do their bit in terms of supply reduction, but there is a great lot that the community can do in terms of demand reduction, and that's how we sort of set on this journey. And what we do today is work with children starting sixth standard. We work with sensitizing them on being able to say no. They know that it is not good to do drugs. Everybody is aware of it. Every child knows about the dangers of it, but they still take to it. Or it's in their faces that they can't refuse. So how do you
No,
teach
but
them?
this particular danger and this its distribution is not visible for me as an individual who doesn't take interest in any of this. Nobody tells me about it. One doesn't hear about it. In fact, I discovered the seriousness of it when I read Rishraj Singh's book. After he had gone to 800 schools and colleges in Kerala, he came out with this book, and where he has described it in horrid details and how this is not known. Most people deny it, and therefore it's not be very easy to deal with a problem in that situation, isn't it? And suppose you go and ask a school headmaster or principal, I'd like to know more about the drug problem here. He'll say there is no drug problem. What you?
Actually, when we started 6 years ago, more or less it was so. In terms of denial. And that is one of the first things that we actually deal with while working with the school or the unit of the family or even a group of friends. So there is denial that's in the foreground for us. But the challenge, like you said, is if you're really not looking, you're not going to see the problem. But look at the newspapers, look at the news, look at everyday discussions around what's happening in terms of conflict with the law, children in conflict with the law. These are the issues that stand up. Children in conflict with the law, primarily today, at least in Kerala, is to do with drugs and narcotics. Arrests are primarily because they're
No, but
media.
those reports come only when some celebrity is involved, like it happened in Mumbai. So then suddenly it becomes an issue. Everybody talks about it, but then you forget about it all. So the fact that it is a spreading and a difficult menace to the society is not fully realized even now. And I suppose that awareness campaign must be one of the important parts of your work.
It forms the core of the work that I do, because as of the statistics of what we see today, Kerala is second to Punjab. We've nearly lost Punjab to the issue of narcotics and substance abuse. And Kerala is just behind Punjab, which is a serious issue for the state that we are, the size, the population, and the human resource that we consider as a biggest asset. It's hitting right at the core of our people asset. And
But why
children,
is this?
youngsters,
Why is Punjab so grave situation? Is it because it is on the border, or is it because of some particular habits there? And why? Is there a similarity between the problems in Punjab and the problems in Kerala?
there are primarily three ways to look at it because considering the geography of India, we have over 15,000 kilometers of a land border right in the north, shared by over seven countries. And that itself is a very porous border. We are not able to contain or have a border security across. So when it comes to Punjab, our access to the Golden Crescent, we are sandwiched between the Golden Crescent and the Golden Triangle. Golden Crescent is primarily Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Iran, where they are the highest producers of opium and heroin in the world. They have a traditional trade route, 600, 700, 1,000-year-old trade route that they have been following for business and trade, which today is actually the route for
Ending up
trading
in the
drugs.
west. Ending up in the west. Is it? Ending up in the west.
Exactly. Yes, yes. And this side in the Golden Triangle,
So
we have Indonesia, Myanmar, there also they produce opium and heroin, the largest producers on this side of. So India is kind of sandwiched between it. And there are two strategic places. Punjab is one for the land entry, while Kerala is the maritime entry. So our problem is not primarily that there is a demand for drugs in Kerala. What is happening today and what we see as a trend is that there is a supply excess which is seeping into our local markets or the local people or the local schools. It's not because there's a demand, it's because there's an excess. Like in Portugal, Mexico, all the stories is because there was excess and couldn't move out of those countries. They were all trade routes. And it started seeping into the community. Our risk is that. Kerala's risk is primarily that we are sandwiched in that very strategic space, well connected by roads, the airway, and maritime. So we have a serious problem of
therefore, it's a transit problem. And
exactly.
during transit, it gets eaten into the society. Is that what you mean?
More or less. That's the understanding of today's issue of narcotics and substance abuse problems in our state. It's that there is an excess of a supply which is now going into our local markets, which is why we as a society really need to get vigilant, open up. We cannot allow this, this community has to be aware, and we cannot just sit back and say, no, it's not my problem anymore. It's not yet in my backyard because 6 years before that's what it sounded like. Today teachers and schools call us, please Project Venda come to. For our reason to expand to the 6 districts is also because of that. One, because we're being called, people are calling us from across the state because we've developed this very contextual Malayalam English combination of delivering our sensitization programs. Two, 6 districts have been red flagged by the center, the Central Drug Demand Reduction Program, National Action Plan for Drug Demand Reduction, has listed 6 districts in Kerala, which is practically half of Kerala. There are 274 cities that are listed in the country, and out of that, 6 is in Kerala. For us, we really
And
cannot afford to just sit back and.
both rural and urban areas, not only urban areas, right? Even in rural
Right.
schools, this problem exists.
And that's something special about
But
Kerala. We are not.
how does it reach the villages and the small schools and so on? Who carries this out? How does it happen? There is a drug cartel or what?
It's really scary to say that there are cartels that function out of Kerala, but it's a very organized crime program. It's a very organized trafficking program that's running in Kerala. The more you look at it, because we are dealing with children as young as 10 and 12-year-olds who are the last leg delivery of the drug, which means they're muling it for money. It's put in their bag. They don't even touch it. It's put in their bag. They're given a phone with the address on the GPS to deliver, and they're getting money for it. And this shows that there are organized crime groups, organized trafficking groups, organized cross border entry groups that's actually using our children or using our community members to be able to, deliver this to the last mile. So this is within the, consumption of Kerala itself. And like you said, Kerala is a very beautiful place in terms of we are very urban and connected. Our villages are very much connected by roads. We are well connected in terms of today's network of social, structures, web, internet. All of that makes us very urban as a state. So even when we say villages, we're pretty urban in our lifestyle, living, access to technology, which makes us more vulnerable. Makes us very vulnerable.
Well, it's a curse of, we can say that, isn't it? It's a curse of industrialization and modernization and the information revolution. All these things get together in this. But you mean the children don't pay for these drugs, or they do?
At some point, when they are really hooked on, they're helpless. So they don't have money to pay, so they start mulling. It's kind of a vicious cycle in terms of their consumption patterns. Not deliberately also getting into it. If I were to look at a cross section of the children who actually go through treatment programs with us, children really don't take to it because they're just experimenting or it's pure fun or age kind of behavior. It's more today, at least the reasons that's on our table is more because they are thrust into it. They are living in a lifestyle that is normalizing this. They have peers, friends, and family members who are actually into using this in the family or the circles that they live in. So it's more access, acceptance, and social normalization. Even our movies are not doing justice. We have a huge movie segment in the Malayalam industry that kind of is not aware that they're socially normalizing this behavior, which we have to be very careful about. It's not just cannabis anymore. It's psychedelics, it's hard drugs, it's synthetic drugs, opioids off the counters. All of this sort of is alarming, and it's a time that Kerala actually wakes up to this because in the 6 years of our work in this space, we've realized it's actually doubled, and with COVID, our numbers have gone up. We used to be at 8 to 10% as prevalence, and today we're looking at 20%. 20% prevalence in the areas that we have been working.
Because of the loneliness and social distancing and all these aspects, and people take to various crimes, and this is one way of getting over it. But if there is this synthetic production around the world, then these golden triangles, etc., become irrelevant, don't they? Because these are the areas where they grow. So, and much of the work done by the government is to destroy crops or spray crops and various things or substitution of crops, etc. But that, how much percentage is natural? If the synthetic production is higher, then all these activities do not count too much, does it?
Exactly. Very relevant international, trafficking crisis is what you brought to this discussion because the old traditional organic or growing countries
marijuana,
exactly opioid, heroin, all of them are switching over. What's happening is if we were to take certain countries that is bordering our nations, which are a threat to our social security and other issues in terms of trafficking, all of them are switching because even a cultivation crop takes a cycle through nature in terms of 3 or 4 months and caring and tending, then pruning, harvesting, then producing the material and then transporting this. That takes time. But switching to synthetics and opioids, it just can be cooked in your backyard, in a lab. Today, it's even being cooked in the bathrooms. And the quantities are smaller, the potency is higher, and it's easy to transport. It's so easy to transport synthetic and psychedelic drugs today. And the kind of methods that's being used, we can't even trace them. They're coming in form of stamps, they're coming in form of pills. The recent drug haul is in form of talc powder, the 3,000 tons that they have at the Mundra seaport is talc powder. So the way they move psychedelic drugs and synthetic drugs is easier these days and quick money and double the money. Sometimes the amount is even beyond our imagination. The other thing with the
It's the middle people, the middlemen who make the money. That is not the producer, not the consumer. But there is some, since the whole thing is a secret operation, they are taking the risk. And obviously, they'll take the risk only if there is value in it. That is all. But most countries of the world, there are very strict regulations on this. Certain countries, capital punishment is mandatory for trafficking. But still, it has not been able to control the drug traffic around the world.
This is a serious international issue. In terms of India, our serious next decade's problem is going to be synthetic opioids, because India is the largest manufacturing hub of pharmaceutical medicines and other related products for the world. We are becoming the hub of manufacturing, and with that comes a license for precursors. Precursors are those legit combinations that are allowed to create medicines, and that's flowing free and that's being misused. Those precursors are available in India, and that's why we see a forecast of the next decade where India is going to become the hub of a synthetic manufacturing space. With that will come more influx into our local market. With that is the risk of our youngsters getting into the problem of narcotics and drugs. So the issues are multi-layered. Like you said, the world is moving away from the opium, heroin space to the psychedelic, psychotropic, synthetic drug space.
You are associated with the UN Office for Drugs and Crime in Vienna, and I served there for about 4 years, very actively in that organization. How effective are they?
The UN, I think, is the only strongest voice that I have heard in the last decade of working in this space. If the UN's voice starts to weaken, I think countries will really have lesser direction in terms of what to do with the problem of drugs and narcotics. The UNODC, that is the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, does some very serious work around demand reduction, harm reduction, and also around treatment and care protocols. They're also working on issues around legalization, where what can be done and how far can the world go in terms of allowing legalization. But there is a greater space that really needs to be explored in terms of prevention, and I think they're doing considerable work which no other agency in the world or an organization can actually do with the span or the influence that they have. So I think that office is the only hope that we hold in terms of giving nations that the line, where to draw the line and what to do.
They have a very small budget, and also it depends on voluntary contributions. I dealt with it for a long time, so I realized that it is a lot of speech making and writing and statistics, etc. But in terms of action, the resources that they have is very limited. Is that true even now?
It is true, because every time we go back to the UN offices for any kind of an intervention that we think is very country specific or region specific or low resource setting specific, they come back with these remarks in terms of low budget, less space to work in, low resources and all that. But the challenge is there's no other body as large as they, or there's no other body that has that much of an influence on member states. And it's a kind of, I think it's all our responsibility to hold that office in control and hold that office responsible for doing what it's supposed to be doing. Because as a nation, our NDPS Act is so robust. Our national Act on the psychotropic substances is pretty robust. It's very strong, very stringent. But when it comes to enforcement, we really fail. And as a country, we are supposed to be reporting, and I'm hoping all of those, all of those standards that we have set in India's space to be reporting into the country specific or the member states, all of that will hold us responsible as well to be delivering on these targets. Because come another decade, we are not talking what we're talking today. India, at least if you say,
The basic conflict within the UNODC and UN members was between some consumer states who think that this cannot be eliminated and therefore it has to be regulated and licensed if possible. That is the Western. When I'm talking about 2000, early 2000s, things may have changed. And we, the developing countries, were very keen on reducing production and enabling legal, the kind of, we are the biggest producer of legal opium, for example. And we are not able to sell it. The market doesn't lift it because there is competition. And that was one, these are the two issues that we dealt with. One, how do we discourage Western governments from promoting it or at least tolerating it? In transit, they have a zero tolerance level, but in consumption, they don't have. There are people who are addicted and they recognize that and say that if we don't give it to them, it will be much worse. And therefore, that philosophy was also there. This was the debate that took place every year at the UNODC meetings. Maybe that continues.
Still continues, and very much on those grounds, because there are a set of nations who see at least the future of cannabis, marijuana, as one of the biggest revenue generations in their countries, and they are lobbying for legalization. A simple example is the US and Canada and Australia. All of them, and India. India, in terms of the size of the affordable consumption market that we will become, marijuana is also being pushed. Legalization is a demand, but what we fail to see is that, like tobacco, like when tobacco in 1900s, 1930s was being produced, there were great, proof to say that tobacco is great as a smoked product. While as an inhalant, as a snuff, it was a stimulant. While it was smoked as a tranquilizer, it was better for breathing and smoking. But in 50 years, what did we have done with tobacco to our people? We've lost people. They say as much as we've lost people in the Second World War just to tobacco, more than the war, in fact. And what we will face as countries is to be said in the next 50 years with marijuana. And marijuana, ganja legalization all over the world has huge investments of money happening. And we can't even fathom the next investment in terms of what will happen in India and if this were to be legalized. But where are the support systems to take care of people? Where are the support health programs, social security programs in our country? The countries who are gunning and lobbying for it have those health social systems in place. Healthcare is robust. Their social service security is in place. But a country like ours will just sink with the problem of marijuana. And knowing that it's a gateway drug, cannabis is a gateway drug that is not to be denied. It is one of those stepping drugs that will lead us to higher, requirements of other drugs. And a combination of this with alcohol and cannabis, all of that is serious, medical issues of health, mental health, psychosis, and we don't have social structures, health structures that can actually support complexities like tobacco today. We are facing the problems with tobacco. And in the next 50 years, if legalization is a debate the world is going with and India follows, we are all. But there's money. That's why the UN debates, like you said, all revolve around the legalization debate. Decriminalization is another discussion.
Anti-smoking campaign, has it succeeded? To compare it with this, I'm saying, over a period of time, at least you find advertisements saying that this is harmful, yes, etc. But has the consumption gone down in tobacco overall?
Actually, yes. Tobacco is going, it's a dying wave now. And that's why the tobacco industries are making huge investments into the marijuana space. Because the tobacco wave is dying and they need to bank on the next wave. And that comes with the whole back end story of the medical benefits of marijuana, the legalization of it as a recreational drug first, and then as a medicinal drug. All of that discussion is because the tobacco wave is dying. There needs to be a next wave.
The same companies which were dealing with tobacco now dealing with drugs. Is that?
Like dealing with cannabis, dealing with cannabis.
Okay. And then that is how is it turned into drugs? Cannabis is just a cultivation. So it's a plant, isn't it?
Right. So
And from
cannabis
plant,
is
who extracts it and who sells it?
yeah. So cannabis today is being manufactured as a medicinal plant in many countries. Even in our country, we have 6 states which have a license to be cultivating for medicinal requirements. But there is the recreational side of cannabis, and that's the biggest market that is now being pushed by the Western countries. The narrative there is that it has more benefits for recreation, for mental health, for keeping people balanced, creativity. All those narratives are being pushed, and cannabis looks like it's the coolest thing to do in the Western markets. What it really does is that there are two components in the plant. Cannabis, kanjavanu arana chediyil, there are two components. One is the medicinal side, which is really minor, 6%, 5%. And then there is a high, the one that actually gives you a high called the THC, which is also 6 to 8% in our traditional plants. So what the industry has done, it has genetically tweaked this plant to the potency of 98% in the plant. About the old traditional our dad's kanjav, granddad valchondana kanjav is not there anymore. The market has tweaked the plant to produce 98% potency of THC, which means
I mean,
what comes in
genetically they have
genetic.
changed. I see.
Yes, genetically they've modified the plant. Even our Idiki Kanjava, the Idiki Gold, is a genetically modified variety. Why is it genetically the best in the world? Because it is modified for resistance of pest and climate. It can resist all. It was a trial Kanjava that landed here 30, 40 years ago and thrived. So
And
what
so
we what
we have legal cultivation in Kerala.
no, not yet. Kerala not there. It's illegal in Kerala. It's illegal in the countries because the argument always stands in India in terms of the traditional use as bhang, for Holi, all of that. We always use the cannabis product, but there is a difference as well in the plant that we used. The she plant and the he plant, the female and the male variety.
Opium was
Exactly.
traditionally used. I remember my grandmother, having opium because she thought that that would solve all her health problems and so on. And we didn't think of it as anything bad, as a
Exactly.
medical help. And that
Same with
impression was there. I think opium is a very respectable medical medicine to take. So at that time, there was no misuse by children, at least one didn't know about. But how is the government handling it? How do you fit into the government machinery?
before I go into the government ministry, I really want to go into that space of the grandma's opium and the granddad's kanja, the cannabis. Is then what like tobacco? If the grandmother in the house was having her pan after the meal, there was a little
Yeah.
portion that was given even to a child because that was a responsible use or a combination of the entire product. Tobacco was wonderful. Tobacco has its own benefits as well, but what happens when you industrialize, commercialize is the problem with all these products. When you commercialize, we are even nicotine. Today's cigarettes are not tobacco anymore. It's pure nicotine that is extracted and then sprayed onto the bud of the cigarette. And there's hardly anything in the tobacco that you're smoking. It's the bud of the cigarette that actually has all these chemicals. So when you commercialize things, you commercialize it for a quick high, the potency is greater, and that's when it becomes carcinogenic and bad for health and body and mind and everything. So same thing is going to happen with cannabis. With the whole concentration change, the potency change, what happens in the market is going to be these products. In the US, they're already having an aftermath of their problems in terms of gummy bear overdose. There are gummy bears for children which have THC components in it. They're legalized, and this is the whole legalization debate. And children come with overdose, having 4 or 5 gummy bears. They don't realize that it is a gummy bear with THC content in it. So that debate of where we said, I know I've also heard stories of my grandma having it in her coffee and all of that. But then that was a very responsible usage. Nobody else as youngsters would consume it, or we had our threshold to be keeping them. But the problem is commercialization. When industries realize there is a wave to ride, this is all tweaked, and that's how, like, they have extracted nicotine. Cannabis extracts are already in the market. THC is coming as potent, high potency drops, which they will add in our food and the bakeries and the ice creams that we get. And the future of this wave will go on. So that's something I just wanted to clarify, because there is this children don't realize it, and what we see as a social normalization when they have all this, or they're product placing it within the movies, is a very relaxed, cool, happy environment. But this morning, as I speak to you, this morning we have had an admission in Trivandrum Medical College. A boy of 16 years old, where the mother is like, take him away, because nobody shows the downside of what cannabis can do, what cannabis does to the young brain, the developing brain. All of that is never shown. And as early as 15, 16, they're having cannabis induced psychosis, which means the family cannot manage the child. The medicinal support, the health system cannot manage these. And for us, if our numbers increase, we don't have the support systems in Kerala. As of today, we don't even have one treatment center for children. It's only
Yeah,
as
that refers to the earlier issue I asked about the government's role. How much are they
exactly.
aware? And is the machinery sufficient, adequate, or what is the situation?
Denial was our, or is our issue, as is for Kerala. When I would go with the case to various departments 5, 6 years ago, they would say we are a tourism state. We cannot afford to have a narrative like this. We're dependent on our tourism industry, and to have a narrative like this going out, where the state's going to come out and say we have a problem, it's something that we should really think about before we accept. But down 6 years, I think now it's all over the news. Drug hauls every other day, border trafficking happening. All of this is becoming too overwhelming, where the state is actually now out in the open saying we have to do something about it. We've done a considerable work with the government as well to sensitize, to show them that there is ground reality to be worried about. A challenge being that one of the biggest challenges we faced was we had no centers where we could take our children for treatment. And the numbers of 8 to 10%, you can just imagine, out of that, at least 2-3% need medical care, full time de addiction rehab care. Those numbers we're not even able to cater, because we don't have child treatment protocols, child dedicated centers. And then we were putting them in adult care homes, where they were equally exposed to the risk of being with people who had serious addiction problems, drug dependency problems. So it's only
There are no centers for young people or
no,
hospitals. No.
private hospitals, a lot of private hospitals. So, like in Ernakulam, we've tied up with 5 hospitals where we've actually asked them to keep beds separately for children. Private hospitals are taking care of this problem, because it's also related with mental health and sexual abuse. It's a combination of a lot of things when children land for care and support programs. It's only 3 months back that the Women and Child Department sort of gave out a circular saying that they're opening 2 centers in Kerala. One is in the Medical College in Trivandrum, and one is in Ernakulam. So, and the other is the issue of gender. When it comes to drug and substance abuse, gender is a huge problem. The girl child, or the girl, or the young lady is also equally vulnerable and in the issue, but the stigma is double. She can't come out, she can't speak about it. We have a status quo where the woman cannot.
So there is a gender balance. Both are equally affected, you think?
Both are equally affected. Both are equally affected, but when it comes to care and treatment program, when it comes to care
when
and
you
treatment,
have
yes.
No, when you talk about your project, do you have actual centers where you can take them? Or no?
We as a program are into a prevention space, where we are actually going from school to school and sensitizing communities, teachers, parents, and children. What we do is we allow for counseling during our program. So every class has a counseling backed program. So while two people take a class, there are two counselors sitting outside waiting for children and talking to them, out of which we get a subset of children who really need help. And those children we network to hospitals. So we have partnerships with various hospitals where, like I said, the beds are put aside, doctors are designated for our care program, and then we send the children in. It cannot We cannot actually think of even running centers like that because we'll need so many centers to be taking care of these children. So the government has to do its bit to set up these places, network with hospitals, network with practitioners. We have great practitioners across Kerala, mental health practitioners who are all aware of this problem. All of them treating children in their private hospitals. But a government setup would be something that we really need to aspire for. One in every district is a must. Those are the vision documents that we've given to the government. We're hoping that the government really steps up their request for opening up child treatment protocols and child centers because the numbers are unimaginably large.
So speaking of gender, according to Rishiraj Singh, the issue is raised with the police or with the authorities are mostly mothers, not fathers. Is there any reason for that?
There is clear indication that it's usually the mother who is bringing the case. For us also, it looks the same. Either it's the teacher in the school who is giving us an alarm signal and bringing a child for support, or it's the mother. And even with the family, when you sit with the family, the father is in total denial. Like we say, my kid can never do it. I'm sure his friends might try, but my child will never do it. So denial also is primarily coming from the family, but the mother is the one who I think in many of our cases, I think majority of our cases sort of is the one who then backs up and says, no, the child definitely needs help. I'm the one who's going to stand by the child. I'll give care and protection and I'll go all the way. There are mothers who even resign their jobs because according to today's care program, we cannot treat the child unless there's a full-time caretaker because they are below 18. The law asks for it. And there are mothers who have left their jobs and sometimes the only earning member of the family as well, just to be able to attend to the child. Yeah. So why the answer would be also because most of the children who, like I said before, come into the care programs with us are children who are exposed to the issue of drugs. That means they have seen it. They've been exposed to it because somebody in the family is already using it. They have ready available substance within their access. So, and in most cases, it's the father. So, as much as I say substance, we are talking alcohol, tobacco, all of the gateway products. Gateway products are which then land children into serious addiction and serious narcotics and cannabis addiction.
And is it true that some of these drugs, even one use makes you an addict? Is that true? Because in other case, alcohol, if you first drink a beer, you don't like it, you can throw it away. But here it is the opposite. It's apparently, if you even try once, it is very difficult to be away from it. Is that your experience?
It is true. There are, like I just said, the potency of the drug or the substance in the market is so high that we have had cases where children, even with one take in 12 hours, are begging for it the next day. When it weans off, they're ready to do anything to get back to that high. So it's primarily because of the potency of the drug that's coming out into the market. Also, the lack of knowledge by people who consume it. So something like an LSD comes in the form of a stamp primarily to transport it. It's easy to transport this. People wouldn't catch the product. It goes unidentified. So the stamp.
But just taking the stamp on your
Exactly.
tongue.
Yeah. So that's the knowledge of the stamp. But practically, a good user knows how to use the stamp. It's a supply for a good 20 days or a month. So the LSD stamp is then cut into 20, 25 small pieces used on a pinhead and put under the tongue. So it's a pinhead dose that comes. So the potency of just one stamp is to last you a good 20 days or a month for a good user. I mean, somebody who knows how to use it. What it does when it lands with children or people who really don't know to use it is that they put it right under the tongue or the armpits and they're overdosed. Most of our cases are overdoses because of the hypertension of the drug that's going into the market. And MDMA, ecstasy, Molly, all of this is when powdered and inhaled or when injected, it causes serious overdose and death. And you're right when you say that these are the kind of products. But laughable in the lot is our children who actually come to our centers and tell us that they trade cannabis. And when we, really get to the narcotics, we work closely with the NCB, the Narcotics Control Bureau. And when they get into the interrogation, it's laughable that our children say that they dry the leaves off the fences. Communist pache made do keduthu. They dry it up and they spray insecticides or bathroom cleaners, rat poison, and that's what they're selling. So you can imagine what's actually cannabis in our local market. These are the products that actually, and children make quick money. When I say children, we're talking 18 and below, 18, 19 years old, young adults, basically. By law, they're still children under 18. So these are the products in our market, and people think they're paying for the good Idiki golds and the best cannabis that Kerala can produce. And these are the actual products. So forget just the high. I think we are looking at market because like I said, it's more not the demand. There is a supply. There is a supply excess seeping in, and supply excess that's not going out into the destined places. So it's finding its local market and local place.
How much
It's
public
worrying.
support do you get in terms of funding and in terms of encouragement? What has been the response of the public? Or do they say, oh, this is not a big issue, why are you bothering us about it? Are they more responsive? Do you get funding for it?
Funding has always been an issue. I think for people working in the social development space, funding is a definite challenge. But as far as Kerala goes, it's just sad that I have to say that we have not found our Kerala sponsor yet. Like I said, we're all in denial. It's not in our backyard. It's not in Kerala. Kerala is not having this problem as much as the data and the evidence proves it. So till now, we run on the sponsorship of Shibulal Philanthropic Initiative from Bangalore. So he knows our organization from Bangalore, and his wife Kumari is the patron. So there is support from them, but we are yet to land some serious support in terms of CSR funding or the government slowly coming in. But in principle, there is a responsibility of the community and the CSR money that needs to be put into issues like this. When it comes to a community, I think we have great support because we work primarily in red flagged areas, communities where the problems are very high. And there we have total support from the parents, taxi driver unions, auto unions. You can't even imagine the kind of people support we can garner to be able to create safe communities, what we call as substance abuse free environments. All the schools are vulnerable. Outside the school, they're selling. So how do you keep watch over this? We get parents to stand at the gate when it's done, when the schools are over.
What happened during the pandemic when the schools were all closed and so on? Still, consumption went on, I think.
And doubled.
And
doubled.
No, how does that work? Where do they get the access if they're all staying at home with the parents and still they're able to manage it? In fact, one argument I heard was because it is easier to take drugs rather than alcohol because alcohol gives a smell. But the drug doesn't give you a smell, so nobody can recognize that you are under it. Is that true?
Which is true if it's not cannabis. Cannabis definitely, if you smoke, does sort of betray you that you're using it. But the other synthetic drugs, the psychedelic drugs, the opioids, the prescription drugs, nobody is going to know if the child is using it.
You may not even know somebody is using it,
exactly.
except through the clinical study, and that too scientifically. your studies, obviously.
Right,
And
right.
tell us
You wouldn't.
about your international involvement. I know you're regularly going to the UN agencies, etc. So how much do they use you, or how much you use them in terms of your work in Kerala?
Um, I'm just proud to say that the project that we run, Project Kerala, is a live project at the UN. We've been called the last 3 years to be presenting the success story of the work we do. I also work very closely with the World Federation Against Drugs, and I'm on the board of the Asia region representing. So there is merit to say that we as Kerala are very fairly early in this issue of handling the problem. And there are countries who are closely watching what we could do to, sort of curb the problem. And our case of Project VENDA is a live case. And there are a lot of countries who are actually studying our program. And it's sometimes very exciting, as much as the problem is bad for me. It's just exciting that there is an evidence-backed program that we're running. And when you look at the SDGs, it sort of fits into nine. It caters into the nine SDG goals when we look at just handling one problem of the issue of substance abuse. So uh, the UN has been showcasing our program, and for us, it also is a space where we get to learn. At least for me and the team that goes from India, there is a lot of opportunity for best practices sharing and learning, which would not have happened otherwise. There's a lot of opportunity to understand what happens to countries and economies when they go the legalization path, or what happens, like Mexico or Canada or Australia. What has happened in terms of narco terrorism? All of that is a big learning for us to bring back and see that we don't, simply like Mexico, if tomorrow we were going to talk about Kerala, God's own country, and talk tourism, I wonder how much of it will look interesting if we have, our news clippings like a Mexican, rollout every day. So we're not ready for it in terms of even the
So
economy.
now with the return of the Taliban in
Exactly.
Afghanistan, the things could get much worse. If they
Right.
don't get international assistance, they will go to narco terrorism in a big way. That is another threat. So the
That's
picture is fairly gloomy, but what are the good points? Is there any good news in all this?
the good news is our faith in youngsters. As much as I talk about the 10 to 12% that's in the problem and the numbers that are increasing, there's a fairly good 80%, 85% that are not
So you
in
have
this
been able
space.
to make a dent on the younger people's view.
Exactly. There's a promise in the youth, and we see that they cannot, as much as the communities and lobbies try to make this as a socially normalized behavior. I think there's power in the youth to decipher the good from the bad, and I think we as a community need to do that for them. We need to show them that that. Also,
That's
I
a,
think we need to take
that's a,
responsibility.
but let me also talk to you about another interest that you have. You have a conservation artist, you call yourself. What does it mean? You paint, animals which are about to be extinct, or what?
Yeah, that's something that I do to keep my sanity in terms of I didn't know I didn't know I was an artist till like 4 years back, but I always knew I had a desire to do it, and um, because of what I deal with every day is very overwhelming. I sort of needed an outlet, and that's when I actually started to paint. And I'm just blessed to be considered as a conservation artist because few of my I draw and yeah, and animals
Is there
basically.
is there a like that? There a group of painters like that? I never heard of
Yes,
this conservation artists. There are
yes,
widespread,
yes. It's quite
and
widespread.
you only focus on these animals. You don't paint anything else.
Yes, though I have discovered I can paint other stuff, but this is what I love to do. I love painting animals, and sort of have also got some good reviews. So I'm just one of those happy artists who loves doing this. And also I've got some good reviews in terms of collectors who picked up my work and have it in their homes and offices. So it's just a space I'm exploring. Thanks for that. Thanks for mentioning
So
that.
this is the brighter side of your life. Not always
Yes.
dealing with the evils. We used to say, the ambassadors in Vienna should be all saints because we are all fighting evils of all kinds. Nuclear non-proliferation, drugs, terrorism, all these officers were in Vienna. So we used to say we must be the epitome of all virtues because we are fighting all these evils. So you must be one of them, feeling satisfied that you are fighting against the evils of the society. But on the other hand, you also have your interest in painting, and that also contributes to a lot. So thank you very much for spending a little time with us and talking about these issues. Because these are not the issues which are generally discussed. That is one of the reasons why I invited you, because what your work has to be known to people. People are to realize the seriousness of it, and also the fact that you are making at least a small dent in this situation is something which is hard. So thank you very much for joining me and for discussing these issues frankly, and your dedication and commitment are really, really impressive. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for inviting me. This is such an honor. I just don't know how to thank you for it because one, the case doesn't get heard. Two, somebody like you inviting me to your show is really something that I really could not have asked for. And thank you so much for bringing this issue to the forefront. We need people like you. We need stalwarts like you to come out and say that the community needs to get together to solve it. So this evening has been beautiful, and thank you so much for it.
Thank you very much, Diana. All the very best.
Thank you, sir.